Last week, someone half your talent got the promotion you deserved. Yesterday, your partner said something that cut deep, and you fired back words you can't take back. This morning, a stranger on the road made you so angry that you carried that rage into every conversation for the next 3 hours. Here's what nobody wants to admit. You're not losing because life is unfair. You're losing because every time someone pushes your buttons, you let them win. Every single time you react, you hand over your power like it's nothing. Think about the people you truly respect. The ones who seem untouchable, unshakable, almost superhuman in their composure. They're not smarter than you. They're not luckier than you. They just figure out the one secret that changes everything. They've mastered the gap, that sacred space between what happens to them and how they respond. While everyone else is exploding, defending, attacking, they're standing still in the center of the storm, completely in control. The ancient Stoics knew it. Modern neuroscience proves it. And the most successful people alive practice it every single day. When you stop reacting to everything, you stop being a slave to everything. So here's my question for you. How much of your life are you willing to lose to your temper? How many more relationships will you damage? How many more opportunities will you miss? How many more nights will you lie awake, replaying arguments you wish you'd never started? Because here's the truth that will set you free. The moment you master your reactions, you master your life. Not someday, not eventually. Right now, at this moment, you can choose to be different. Are you ready to take back control? Are you ready to become the person who stays cool while everyone else loses their mind? Then stop letting the world play you like a puppet, and let's discover the power you've had all along. The power of not reacting. Chapter 1. The Reaction Trap. Why your instant responses are destroying your life. Here's something that happened last Tuesday that perfectly captures what we're talking about. A man named David, a senior manager at a tech company, was leading a meeting with his team when one of his employees, clearly having a bad day, interrupted a mid-sentence and said his entire strategy was backwards and a waste of time. The room went silent. Everyone waited to see what would happen. They'd all been there before, in that moment when someone disrespects you publicly and your blood starts boiling. Most people in that situation would have done what feels natural. Snap back. Assert dominance. Put that employee in their place in front of everyone. David did something different. He paused for what felt like 10 seconds, but was probably 3. Then he said calmly, "That's interesting. Tell me more about what you're seeing." No defensiveness. No anger. Just curiosity. What happened next changed everything. The employee, expecting a fight, was completely disarmed. He explained his concern, and it turned out he had a valid point that David hadn't considered. The strategy got better. The team respected David more, not less. And the employee later apologized for his tone, something he would never have done if David had reacted with ego. That's the power of not reacting. David could have won the battle and lost the war. Instead, he won everything by choosing not to fight at all. But here's what most people don't understand until it's too late. Your instant reactions aren't just uncomfortable moments you'd rather avoid. They're actively destroying the life you're trying to build, and you don't even see it happening. Let's talk about the real cost of reactivity, because until you understand what you're losing, you won't have the motivation to change. Every time you react emotionally to something, you're making an invisible withdrawal from your life account. Sometimes it's small, a slightly worse mood, a minor tension with someone you care about. But those small withdrawals add up faster than you think, and sometimes the withdrawal is massive. A destroyed friendship, a lost job, a reputation that takes years to rebuild. Think about your energy for a moment. Not just physical energy, but your mental and emotional bandwidth. You only have so much of it each day. Reactions are energy vampires. They drain you faster than almost anything else you do. Remember the last time someone said something that really got under your skin? Maybe it was a criticism that felt unfair. Maybe it was a comment that seemed designed to hurt you. How long did you think about it afterward? An hour? The whole day? Did you replay it in your mind, crafting the perfect comeback you should have said? Did you vent to 3 different people about how wrong they were? All of that was your energy, your precious mental resources, going up in smoke. Energy that could have gone into your work, your creativity, your relationships, your goals. Instead, it went into an emotional fire that produced nothing but ash. The mathematician and philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote something profound. He said that all of humanity's problems stem from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. What he meant was that we can't handle discomfort. We can't sit with our feelings without immediately acting on them. We have to react, respond, do something to make the discomfort go away right now. And that inability to sit with discomfort for even 60 seconds costs us everything. Let's talk about your relationships, because this is where reactivity does its worst damage. Marriages don't end because of one catastrophic event. They end because of 1,000 tiny reactions that slowly poison the connection between 2 people. It's the eye roll when your partner tells a story you've heard before. It's the defensive snap when they make a simple request. It's the sarcastic comment that gets a laugh but leaves a bruise. It's every time you choose being right over being kind. Every time you let your mood dictate your behavior. Every time you react to their reaction until you're both so far from the original issue that you can't even remember what started the fight. Your kids are watching too. They're learning from you what it means to be human, what it looks like to handle frustration and disappointment and conflict. When you lose your temper over spilled juice, you're not just having a bad moment. You're teaching them that big emotions justify bad behavior. You're programming their nervous systems to react the same way. And your friendships? The good ones can weather disagreements, but they can't survive constant reactivity. Nobody wants to walk on eggshells around you, never knowing what innocent comment will set you off. Nobody wants to be the emotional dumping ground for your bad days. Now let's talk about your career, because this is where reactivity becomes expensive in the most literal sense. You know what separates people who climb the ladder from people who get stuck? It's rarely about who's smarter or who works harder. It's about who can handle pressure without melting down. Think about the last time you were in a tense meeting. Maybe a client was upset. Maybe a project went wrong. Maybe someone criticized your work in front of others. The person who kept their cool, who stayed focused on solutions instead of getting defensive, that's the person everyone remembers as a leader. That's the person who gets the promotion. Technical skills are table stakes. Emotional control is the differentiator. Companies don't promote people who can't handle stress. They don't give bigger responsibilities to people who fall apart when things get difficult. They don't put reactive people in leadership positions because reactive leaders create chaos. And here's the brutal truth about professional reputation. Warren Buffett was right when he said it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. Those 5 minutes usually involve saying something you can't take back in a moment of anger, sending an email you wish you hadn't sent, losing your composure in front of the wrong people. But perhaps the highest cost of reactivity is something most people never even consider. It's what it does to your relationship with yourself. Every time you react in a way you're not proud of, part of you knows you lost control. You gave your power to someone else. You let them determine your emotional state. You became a puppet on someone else's strings. And that knowledge, even if it's buried deep in your subconscious, erodes your self-respect. You start to trust yourself less. You become afraid of your own emotions because you don't know what you'll do when they take over. You avoid difficult conversations because you're not sure you can handle them. You build your life around avoiding triggers instead of developing the strength to handle them. That's no way to live. That's a prison of your own making. So why do we do this? Why do intelligent, capable people keep reacting in ways that hurt them? The answer is actually fascinating, and it starts with understanding that your brain is running on ancient software that's completely mismatched to modern life. 200,000 years ago, when your ancestors were living on the African savanna, instant reactions were survival. If you saw a shadow move in the grass, and you stopped to analyze whether it was a lion or just the wind, you became lunch. The people who survived were the ones whose brains could trigger an instant response. Fight, flight, or freeze. No thinking required. That alarm system in your brain, your amygdala, it saved humanity. It's the reason you're here, but it's also the reason you send angry texts you regret, say things that damage relationships, and make decisions in the heat of the moment that haunt you for years. Here's the problem. Your amygdala cannot tell the difference between a real physical threat and a perceived emotional threat. It can't distinguish between a lion and a difficult email from your boss. To your ancient brain, they're both threats. So it does what it's programmed to do. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline, raises your heart rate, shuts down your rational thinking, and prepares you to fight or run. This is what Daniel Goleman, the psychologist who popularized emotional intelligence, calls an amygdala hijack. Your emotional brain literally hijacks your thinking brain. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that does rational analysis and considers consequences, it goes offline. You're operating on pure emotion and instinct. Ever said something in anger and then thought, "Why on earth did I say that? That's not even how I feel." That's why. You weren't thinking. You literally couldn't think in that moment. Your thinking brain was offline and your reactive brain was driving. And here's what makes it worse. We live in a culture that celebrates reactivity. Social media rewards outrage with likes and engagement. News outlets discovered that anger drives clicks better than almost anything else. Reality television is built entirely on watching people lose their composure. We've created an entire ecosystem that profits from your inability to control your reactions. Think about the language we use. We tell people to clap back, to not let anyone disrespect them, to stand their ground. It all sounds empowering, doesn't it? But here's what it really means. It means let other people's behavior control yours. It means give your power to whoever manages to push your buttons first. It means spend your precious life reacting to things that won't matter tomorrow. The truly powerful people don't play that game. They understand what the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius figured out 2,000 years ago. He wrote in his journal, which we now call Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Read that again. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Not what people say, not what happens. Your mind. That's it. That's all you control. And that's everything. Let me show you how the reaction trap actually works, because once you see the cycle, you can start to break it. Something happens. Someone says something or doesn't do something. That's the trigger. In that instant, before you're even aware of it consciously, your brain is evaluating whether this is a threat. And because your brain is wired for survival, it's biased toward yes. So you react. You snap back. You get defensive. You withdraw. You attack. You do something driven by emotion rather than intention. Now your reaction creates a new situation. Maybe the other person escalates. Maybe you've said something you can't unsay. Maybe you've made a small problem into a big problem. The situation is now worse than before you reacted. Later, when you've calmed down, you realize you overreacted. You feel that uncomfortable mix of regret and shame. And here's where it gets interesting. To protect your ego, to avoid feeling like you're a bad person, your brain does something clever. It rationalizes. They started it. I had every right to be upset. Anyone would have reacted that way. They shouldn't have said that if they didn't want me to respond. You create a story where your reaction was justified, even necessary. And because you've rationalized it instead of learning from it, you're guaranteed to react the same way next time. The pattern strengthens. The neural pathways get deeper. Reactivity becomes your default mode. This is the trap. And most people spend their entire lives in it without ever realizing there's a way out. Before we go any further, we need to clear up some dangerous misconceptions about what it means to not react, because I can already hear some of you thinking this sounds like being a pushover. Non-reactivity is not about being passive. It's not about suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't feel things. It's not about letting people walk all over you or becoming some kind of emotionless robot. Here's what it actually is. Non-reactivity is the ability to feel everything while being controlled by nothing. It's responding thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. It's processing what you feel before you express it. It's choosing your battles instead of fighting everyone. It's caring deeply while maintaining your composure. There's a universe of difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is unconscious, immediate, emotional, and usually regretted. A response is conscious, considered, intentional, and aligned with who you want to be. Reactions happen to you. You're a victim of your emotions. Responses come from you. You're the author of your actions. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron has this beautiful metaphor. She says you are the sky and everything else is just weather. The storms of life, the difficult people, the frustrating situations, the unexpected setbacks, they're all just weather passing through. But when you react, you stop being the sky and you become the storm. You lose yourself in the chaos. So here's your wake-up call. How many moments of your life have you lost to reactivity? How many relationships have been damaged by your inability to pause before responding? How many opportunities have you missed because you couldn't keep your cool under pressure? How much energy have you wasted being angry about things that don't matter? And more importantly, how much more are you willing to lose? Because here's the good news that makes all of this worth confronting. You can change. Your brain is neuroplastic, which means it can be rewired. The patterns can be broken. The habits can be unlearned. You can develop the skill of non-reactivity. And when you do, it will change absolutely everything about your life. But it starts right here, right now, with brutal honesty. With recognizing that most of your stress doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from how you react to what happens to you. Most of your conflicts aren't caused by other people being difficult. They're caused by you being reactive. Most of your regrets aren't about what you did. They're about how you did it. That's simultaneously the hardest and most liberating truth you'll ever accept. It's hard because it means taking responsibility. There's nobody else to blame. But it's liberating because it means you have the power to change. You don't need other people to be different. You don't need circumstances to improve. You just need to master the one thing you actually control, how you respond. And that one thing, that changes everything. Chapter 2, The Neuroscience of Reactivity, Why Your Brain Betrays You. Here's a truth that might actually set you free. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're not a bad person because you react. You're just running on a brain that was never designed for the world you live in. Understanding this changes everything. Because once you see why your brain does what it does, you stop blaming yourself and start training yourself. And that shift from shame to strategy is where real transformation begins. Let's go deep inside your skull for a moment, because what's happening in there explains every overreaction you've ever had. Your brain has essentially 3 layers that developed over millions of years of evolution. At the bottom, you have your reptilian brain, the oldest part. This handles basic survival functions like breathing, heart rate, and the fight or flight response. It's fast, automatic, and completely unconscious. Wrapped around, that is your limbic system, sometimes called the emotional brain. This is where your amygdala lives, that almond-shaped cluster of neurons that acts as your brain's smoke detector. It's constantly scanning for threats, and when it detects one, it sounds the alarm before you even know what's happening. Finally, at the very top, you have your prefrontal cortex. This is the newest part of your brain, the part that makes you human. It handles rational thinking, long-term planning, impulse control, and considering consequences. It's the voice that says maybe I shouldn't send that text while I'm angry. Here's the problem. When your amygdala detects a threat, it essentially hijacks your entire brain. It floods your system with stress hormones and actually reduces blood flow to your prefrontal cortex. Your rational brain literally goes dim while your emotional brain takes the wheel. As neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux discovered, sensory information reaches your amygdala about twice as fast as it reaches your thinking brain. That means you're already reacting before you've had a chance to think. The alarm has been pulled before you can evaluate whether there's actually a fire. This is why you could be a highly intelligent, successful person and still say incredibly stupid things when you're triggered. Intelligence doesn't protect you from amygdala hijacks. In those moments, everyone becomes reactive because everyone's brain works the same way. Dr. Jill Bold Taylor, a Harvard-trained neuroscientist who studied her own stroke, discovered something remarkable about emotions. She found that the chemical lifespan of an emotion in your body is only about 90 seconds. That's it. 90 seconds from a moment a feeling is triggered to when it naturally dissipates. So why do we stay angry for hours, days, sometimes years? Because we keep re-triggering the emotion with our thoughts. We replay the situation. We rehearse what we should have said. We tell the story to others. Each time, we're giving our brain a fresh dose of stress hormones, extending an experience that should have lasted a minute and a half into something that poisons our entire day. As the Buddha said over 2,000 years ago, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Modern neuroscience has proven him exactly right. When you stay reactive, you're not hurting them. You're flooding your own system with cortisol and adrenaline, damaging your health while they go about their day completely unaffected. Now let's talk about what chronic reactivity actually does to your brain and body, because the costs are far higher than most people realize. When you're constantly triggered, constantly in fight or flight mode, your body never gets a chance to recover. Cortisol, which is meant to be released in short bursts during emergencies, becomes a permanent resident in your bloodstream. This leads to inflammation, weakened immune function, disrupted sleep, weight gain, and accelerated aging. Your brain physically changes too. Studies have shown that chronic stress actually shrinks your prefrontal cortex while enlarging your amygdala. In other words, the more reactive you are, the more reactive you become. Your brain literally gets better at overreacting and worse at thinking clearly. It's a vicious cycle that feeds itself. But here's where it gets hopeful. The same neuroplasticity that works against you can work for you. Your brain can be rewired. The neural pathways that fire when you react can be weakened, while new pathways for calm, measured responses can be strengthened. Every time you pause instead of react, you're not just avoiding a bad outcome. You're actually changing your brain. You're building new neural connections that make the next pause easier. As psychologist Donald Hebb famously said, neurons that fire together wire together. Each time you choose response over reaction, you're literally rewiring your brain for composure. This is why non-reactivity is a skill, not a personality trait. Some people seem naturally calm, but that's usually because they've had more practice, either consciously or through life circumstances that taught them early. The good news is that practice works for everyone. You can develop this skill regardless of your temperament or history. Research from the University of Wisconsin found that just 8 weeks of mindfulness training produced measurable changes in brain structure. Participants showed increased gray matter in areas associated with emotional regulation and decreased activity in the amygdala. 8 weeks. That's how fast your brain can change when you train it intentionally. Here's what this means for you practically. When you feel triggered, when you feel that surge of emotion rising in your chest, you're not facing a character flaw. You're facing a neurological event that has been happening to humans for hundreds of thousands of years. The difference between people who stay calm and people who explode isn't that calm people don't feel the surge. They feel it just like you do. The difference is what happens in the next few seconds. They've trained themselves to recognize the hijack as it's happening and insert a pause before it takes over completely. William James, the father of American psychology, said something profound over a century ago. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. He understood before brain scans existed that we have more control than we think. Not control over the initial trigger, Not control over the first flash of emotion, but control over what happens next. And what happens next is everything. Your brain is not your enemy. It's an ancient survival machine doing exactly what it evolved to do. But you're not your brain. You're the awareness that can observe your brain, understand its patterns, and choose a different path. The amygdala will keep sounding alarms. That's its job, and you can't stop it. But you can train yourself to pause when the alarm sounds, to take a breath, to let your prefrontal cortex come back online before you act. You can learn to feel the surge without being swept away by it. This is the neurological foundation of everything we'll build together in the chapters ahead. Understanding that your reactions are biological, not moral failures. Understanding that calm is a skill that can be developed. Understanding that every moment of pause is literally reshaping your brain. You're not fighting against yourself. You're upgrading yourself. And that upgrade starts with knowing exactly what you're working with. The machine in your skull is ancient and powerful, but you're the operator. And operators can learn new ways to run even the oldest machines. Chapter 3. The Sacred Pause, your most powerful weapon. There's a moment that exists between every trigger and every reaction. It's invisible to most people. It passes in a flash, unnoticed and unused. But within that moment lives all of your power, all of your freedom, and the entire difference between the life you're living and the life you could be living. This moment is the pause, and learning to find it will change everything. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi death camps, wrote about this moment with a clarity that has guided millions. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Frankl discovered this truth in the most horrific circumstances imaginable. Everything had been taken from him: his family, his possessions, his dignity, his freedom. But he realized that even in a concentration camp, there was one thing no one could take: his ability to choose how he responded to his suffering. If Frankl could find that space in a death camp, you can find it when someone cuts you off in traffic. You can find it when your partner says something thoughtless. You can find it when your boss criticizes your work unfairly. The pause is always there. The question is whether you've trained yourself to use it. Most people live their entire lives without ever discovering this space. They think trigger and reaction are one continuous event, like cause and effect in physics. Something happens, they react, and it feels completely automatic, completely inevitable, completely out of their control. But it's not automatic. It's just fast. So fast that it seems automatic. The neurological gap between stimulus and response is measured in milliseconds, but it exists. And with practice, you can stretch those milliseconds into seconds, and those seconds into a completely different life. Think about the last time you reacted badly to something. Maybe you said something hurtful. Maybe you sent an angry message. Maybe you made a decision driven by emotion that you later regretted. Now imagine you had paused for just 5 seconds before responding. Just 5 seconds of breathing, of awareness, of letting your rational brain catch up to your emotional brain. Would you have done the same thing? Almost certainly not. Because in those 5 seconds, a dozen other options would have become visible. Options that were always there, but got bulldozed by the speed of your reaction. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus understood this deeply. He taught that it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things. And judgments take time. When you pause, you give yourself time to choose your judgment rather than having one forced upon you by raw emotion. So how do you actually create this pause in real life? When emotions are flooding your system and every instinct is screaming at you to react right now. The first technique is breathtakingly simple, and I mean that literally. When you feel triggered, take one deep breath before you do anything else. Not a shallow chest breath, but a slow, deep belly breath. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6. This isn't just a calming technique. It's a neurological intervention. Deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of your fight or flight response. It signals to your brain that you're not actually in danger, which helps bring your prefrontal cortex back online. One breath can shift your entire internal state. The second technique is to buy yourself time with simple phrases. When someone says something triggering, you don't have to respond immediately. You can say, "Let me think about that for a moment." You can say, "That's interesting. I need a second to process." You can say, "I want to give you a real answer, so give me a minute." These phrases are social pause buttons. They're completely acceptable in any conversation, and they give you the space you need to respond rather than react. Nobody will think less of you for taking a moment to consider your words. In fact, most people will respect you more. The third technique is physical. When you feel the surge of emotion, notice where it shows up in your body. Maybe your chest tightens. Maybe your jaw clenches. Maybe your shoulders rise toward your ears. Just noticing these physical sensations creates a tiny bit of distance between you and the emotion. You shift from being the anger to observing the anger. You're no longer fully identified with the feeling. You're witnessing it. And that witnessing creates space. That sacred space where choice becomes possible. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, wrote, "If you are patient in one moment of anger, you will escape 100 days of sorrow." This is not poetry. This is practical wisdom that modern psychology has proven correct. One moment of patience, one pause, one breath can save you from consequences that last far longer than the emotion that caused them. The fourth technique is what I call the 10-year test. When you feel triggered, ask yourself one simple question. Will this matter in 10 years? Most of the things we react to won't matter in 10 days, let alone 10 years. But our reactions to them can create damage that lasts decades. This question instantly gives you perspective. It zooms you out from the heat of the moment and reminds you what actually matters. Most arguments aren't worth having. Most insults aren't worth responding to. Most triggers are small things that feel big only because we're standing too close to them. The fifth technique is naming the emotion. Neuroscience research has shown that simply labeling what you're feeling reduces its intensity. When you say to yourself, "I'm feeling angry right now," you activate your prefrontal cortex and reduce activity in your amygdala. The act of naming creates cognitive distance. Instead of being consumed by the emotion, you're observing it. You're a scientist studying your own experience. And scientists don't react to their data. They analyze it. Here's what I want you to understand. The pause is not about suppressing your emotions. It's not about pretending you don't feel things. It's about creating enough space to feel fully without being controlled completely. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be hurt. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. The pause isn't about denying those feelings. It's about choosing what you do with them. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "For every minute you remain angry, you give up 60 seconds of peace of mind." The pause is how you stop giving away your peace. It's how you keep your power where it belongs, with you. This skill takes practice. You won't be perfect at it. You'll still react sometimes, still say things you regret, still wish you had paused when you didn't. That's part of being human. But every time you do pause, every time you take that breath, every time you create that space, you're building a new habit. You're strengthening new neural pathways. You're becoming the person who responds rather than reacts. The sacred pause is always available to you. In every moment, in every situation, with every person. The space between stimulus and response is your birthright. All you have to do is claim it. Chapter 4. Emotional Intelligence, the real measure of strength. There's a reason some people with average intelligence build empires while geniuses struggle to hold down jobs. There's a reason some people with every advantage self-destruct while others with nothing rise to the top. And there's a reason your smartest friend might also be your most miserable one. The difference isn't IQ. It's EQ, emotional intelligence. and it might be the most important factor in determining how your life turns out. Daniel Goleman, who brought emotional intelligence into mainstream awareness, put it simply. He said, if your emotional abilities aren't in hand, if you don't have self-awareness, if you're not able to manage your distressing emotions, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. He was right, and decades of research have proven him right over and over again. Studies show that emotional intelligence predicts success better than IQ in almost every field. Leaders with high emotional intelligence build better teams. Salespeople with high emotional intelligence close more deals. Doctors with high emotional intelligence have better patient outcomes. Marriages between emotionally intelligent partners last longer and report higher satisfaction. This isn't soft science or feel-good philosophy. This is hard data showing that your ability to understand and manage emotions determines your outcomes more than almost any other factor. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? It breaks down into 4 core components, and understanding each one will transform how you navigate the world. The first component is self-awareness. This is your ability to recognize what you're feeling as you're feeling it. Most people are surprisingly bad at this. They know they're upset, but they can't tell you whether it's anger, hurt, fear, or frustration. They can't identify the trigger or understand why this particular thing bothered them so much. Self-awareness is the foundation of everything else. You can't manage emotions you don't recognize. You can't change patterns you don't see. As the ancient Greek aphorism inscribed at the Temple of Delphi declared, "Know thyself." 2,000 years later, this remains the starting point of all wisdom. The second component is self-management. This is your ability to regulate your emotions rather than being controlled by them. It's the pause we talked about in the last chapter. It's impulse control. It's the ability to stay calm under pressure and recover quickly from emotional disruptions. Self-management doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means expressing them appropriately. It means choosing your response rather than letting your emotions choose for you. It's the difference between feeling angry and acting angry. The third component is social awareness. This is your ability to read other people, to sense what they're feeling, to understand their perspective even when they don't spell it out. It's empathy in action. Socially aware people notice the subtle signs that others miss. They see when someone is uncomfortable even if they're saying they're fine. They sense the mood of a room the moment they walk in. They understand that what people say and what people mean are often different things. Theodore Roosevelt understood this deeply. He said, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." Social awareness is how you show people you care. It's how you build the trust that makes everything else possible. The fourth component is relationship management. This is your ability to use your awareness of your own emotions and others' emotions to navigate interaction successfully. It's conflict resolution. It's influence without manipulation. It's the ability to bring out the best in others rather than the worst. People with strong relationship management skills can have difficult conversations without destroying relationships. They can disagree without being disagreeable. They can lead without creating resentment. They can navigate office politics without becoming political. These 4 components work together as a system. Self-awareness enables self-management. Social awareness enables relationship management. And all 4 together create a person who moves through the world with grace rather than friction. Here's the good news that changes everything. Unlike IQ, which is largely fixed, emotional intelligence can be developed at any age. Your EQ is not your destiny. It's a skill set you can build starting right now. Aristotle said it perfectly over 2,000 years ago. Anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power and is not easy. This is emotional intelligence in ancient words. Not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. feeling fully while choosing wisely. So how do you actually build emotional intelligence? It starts with paying attention. Start noticing your emotional patterns. What triggers you? What situations reliably make you reactive? What types of people push your buttons? Keep a mental note, or better yet, a written journal. Awareness is the first step toward change. Practice labeling your emotions with precision. Don't just say you feel bad. Get specific. Are you disappointed? Embarrassed? Overwhelmed? Jealous? The more precisely you can name it, the better you can manage it. Pay attention to your body. Emotions show up physically before they show up mentally. Learn your personal warning signs. Maybe your chest tightens before you get angry. Maybe your stomach churns before you feel anxious. These physical signals give you early warning, extra time to pause before the emotion takes over completely. Practice perspective taking. Before reacting to someone, try to imagine their experience. What might be going on in their life? What might have led them to act this way? This doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it does help you respond more intelligently to it. Seek feedback from people you trust. Ask them how you come across when you're stressed. Ask them what patterns they notice in your behavior. We all have blind spots, and others can see what we cannot. As Maya Angelou wisely observed, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Emotional intelligence is how you make people feel. It's your true legacy in every interaction. The truly strong people aren't the ones who react the fastest or hit back the hardest. They're the ones who understand what's happening beneath the surface in themselves and others, and respond with wisdom rather than impulse. That strength is available to you. Not someday. Now, one moment of awareness at a time. Chapter 5, Taming the Ego, the Enemy Within. There's a voice in your head right now. It's been talking to you your entire life. It tells you when you've been disrespected. It demands that you prove yourself. It needs to win every argument, have the last word, be right even when being right costs you everything. This voice isn't your friend. It's your ego, and it's probably the biggest obstacle standing between you and the calm, powerful life you deserve. Your ego is the part of you that takes everything personally. It's the part that feels attacked when someone disagrees with you. It's the part that would rather lose an opportunity than admit a mistake. It's the part that says, I can't let them get away with that. And every time you listen to it, you give away your power. Ryan Holiday, author and student of Stoic philosophy, wrote this in his book Ego is the Enemy. The ego we see most commonly goes by a more casual definition, that unhealthy belief in our own importance. Arrogance, self-centered ambition. That's the definition this book uses. It's that petulant child inside every person, the one that chooses getting his or her way over anything or anyone else. That petulant child is running most people's lives. It's making their decisions, controlling their reactions, destroying their relationships. And they don't even see it happening because the ego is sneaky. It disguises itself as strength, as self-respect, as standing up for yourself. But here's the truth. The ego isn't strength. It's fragility pretending to be strength. Truly strong people don't need to prove anything. They don't need to win every battle. They don't need everyone to know how smart, how capable, how right they are. Think about the last time you got into an argument that escalated beyond reason. Maybe it started as a small disagreement, but then something shifted. It stopped being about the issue and became about winning, about not backing down, about not letting the other person think they got the better of you. That shift, that was your ego taking over. And the moment your ego takes over, you've already lost because now you're not fighting for anything real. You're fighting for an imaginary version of yourself that needs constant defending. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the entire Roman Empire yet remained remarkably humble, wrote in his personal journal, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion of us than our own." Read that again. We care more about what others think of us than what we think of ourselves. And that caring, that obsession with how we're perceived, that's the ego demanding to be fed. It's exhausting, and it keeps us trapped in a cycle of reactivity we can't escape. Your ego needs constant validation. Someone praises you, and your ego inflates. Someone criticizes you, and your ego deflates. You're on an emotional roller coaster controlled by external opinions that should have no power over you. The ego makes you defensive. When someone points out a mistake, instead of being grateful for the information, your ego hears an attack. It immediately goes into protection mode. You make excuses. You shift blame. You counterattack. And in the process, you miss the opportunity to learn, to grow, to become better. The ego makes you competitive in ways that hurt you. Your coworker gets recognition, and instead of being happy for them, your ego feels threatened. Your friend achieves something, and instead of celebrating with them, your ego starts comparing. You can't enjoy other people's success because your ego sees it as your failure. The ego makes you hold grudges. Someone wrongs you, and your rational mind knows that forgiveness would set you free. But your ego won't allow it. Your ego says they don't deserve forgiveness until they admit they were wrong, until they apologize the right way, until they suffer enough. So you carry resentment that poisons you while they've moved on with their lives. The Buddhist teacher Ajahn Chah said something profound about this. If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace. What are we letting go of? The ego, the need to be right, the need to win, the need to be recognized, the need to control how others see us. So how do you tame this beast that's been running your life? First, you have to recognize when your ego is in the driver's seat. Notice the feeling that arises when someone challenges you. That defensive tightening, that urge to prove them wrong, that need to assert dominance. That's your ego. Just recognizing it creates space. Second, ask yourself in heated moments, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective? Your ego always wants to be right, but effectiveness often requires letting others be right or finding a third option neither of you had considered. Choose effectiveness over ego every single time. Third, practice the phrase, you might be right. These 4 words are ego poison in the best way. When someone disagrees with you, instead of immediately defending your position, try saying, you might be right. Tell me more about how you see it. Watch what happens. The entire dynamic shifts. Defensiveness dissolves. Curiosity opens. Real conversation becomes possible. Fourth, separate your worth from your outcomes. You are not your job title. You are not your bank account. You are not your achievements or your failures. You are the awareness behind all of those things. When you stop defining yourself by external measures, your ego loses its grip. C.S. Lewis wrote, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. This is the antidote to ego. Not self-hatred, not false modesty, but simply being less obsessed with yourself. Being present to what is rather than how it reflects on you. Fifth, embrace mistakes as data rather than threats. When you mess up, your ego wants to hide it, deny it, blame someone else. But people who grow say, I was wrong. What can I learn from this? They treat mistakes as information rather than indictments. The ego hates this because it shatters the illusion of perfection the ego is desperately trying to maintain. But perfection is a prison. Freedom comes from accepting that you're human, fallible, and still worthy. Here's what happens when you stop feeding your ego. You become harder to manipulate because people manipulate you through your ego. They push your buttons by threatening your self-image. When you're not attached to that self-image, the buttons don't work anymore. You become more creative because the ego is terrified of looking foolish, so it keeps you playing safe. When you let go of that fear, you can take risks, try new things, fail publicly, and learn from it. You become more likable because nobody actually likes being around someone whose ego fills the room. People are drawn to those who are confident but humble, capable but approachable, successful but still human. Most importantly, you become free. Free from the constant need for validation. Free from the exhausting work of defending an image. Free to simply be present to life as it unfolds. The ego will never fully disappear. It's part of being human, but it doesn't have to run the show. You can notice it, acknowledge it, and choose differently. The question isn't whether you have an ego. Everyone does. The question is whether you're going to let it destroy your peace, your relationships, and your power. Because the irony is this: the more you defend your ego, the weaker you become. The more you let it go, the stronger you become. Real strength doesn't need defending. It just is. Chapter 6, Practical Techniques, your emergency toolkit for staying calm. Knowledge without application is just entertainment. You can understand the neuroscience. You can recognize your ego. You can see the value of the pause. But none of it matters if you don't have practical tools you can actually use in the heat of the moment when your world is falling apart. This chapter is your emergency toolkit. These are the techniques you reach for when someone is screaming in your face, when you just got devastating news, when everything in you wants to explode and you need something to hold on to. Let's start with the most powerful technique you'll ever learn. It's called the 10-second rule, and it's devastatingly simple. When something triggers you, count to 10 before you respond. Not quickly, slowly. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way to 10. This sounds almost insulting in its simplicity, but here's why it works. Those 10 seconds give your prefrontal cortex time to come back online. They interrupt the automatic reaction pathway. They create just enough space for wisdom to enter where impulse was about to exit. Benjamin Franklin practiced a version of this centuries ago. He said, "Whatever is begun in anger ends in shame." He understood that the temporary satisfaction of an angry reaction never outweighs the lasting consequences. 10 seconds can save you from shame that lasts years. The second technique is what I call tactical breathing. This is used by Navy SEALs, combat soldiers, and emergency responders because it works even in life or death situations. If it works when people are shooting at you, it'll work in your difficult conversation. Here's how it goes. Breathe in through your nose for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Exhale through your mouth for 4 counts. Hold empty for 4 counts. Repeat this cycle 4 times. This pattern activates your parasympathetic nervous system and tells your body you're safe. It's physiologically impossible to be in full panic mode while breathing this way. Your body calms down, and when your body calms down, your mind follows. The third technique is called the movie screen method. When you're in an emotional situation, imagine you're watching it happen on a screen instead of being inside it. Imagine you're in a theater watching a character who looks like you going through this situation. What would you advise that character to do? This mental shift creates distance. It moves you from being consumed by the emotion to observing the situation. An observation creates choice. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The fourth technique is physical grounding. When emotions overwhelm you, bring your attention to your physical body. Feel your feet on the floor. Notice 5 things you can see. Notice 4 things you can touch. Notice 3 things you can hear. Notice 2 things you can smell. Notice 1 thing you can taste. This technique pulls you out of your spinning thoughts and into the present moment. Emotions live in the past and future. Fear is about what might happen. Anger is often about what already happened. The present moment is actually almost always okay. The fifth technique is called reframing. Every situation can be viewed through multiple lenses. Someone cutting you off in traffic can be seen as disrespect, or it can be seen as someone having an emergency, or as a near miss you're grateful didn't turn into an accident. The facts are the same. Your interpretation determines your emotional response. Viktor Frankl, who we've quoted before, demonstrated this powerfully. He said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. In the concentration camp, he couldn't change his situation, but he could change what it meant to him. That ability to reframe gave him strength when everything else was taken. Practice asking, what else could this mean? When someone criticizes you, instead of immediately taking offense, ask what else it could mean. Maybe they're trying to help. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe there's truth in it you need to hear. Reframing doesn't change reality, but it changes your relationship to reality. The sixth technique is the strategic exit. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is remove yourself from the situation. Say, I need a few minutes, and walk away. Go to the bathroom. Step outside. Get some air. Give yourself physical distance from the trigger. This isn't running away. This is strategic retreat. As the ancient Chinese general Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, he who knows when he can fight and when he cannot will be victorious. Sometimes the way to win is to temporarily withdraw. The seventh technique is pre-commitment. Before you enter a situation you know will be challenging, decide in advance how you want to show up. Going into a difficult meeting, decide beforehand that no matter what is said, you will stay calm and curious. Visiting a family member who always pushes your buttons? Commit in advance to responding rather than reacting. Pre-commitment works because it creates a contract with your future self. When the moment comes, you're not making a decision in the heat of emotion. You're honoring a commitment you made when you were clear-headed. The eighth technique is the empathy bridge. When someone is being difficult, try to imagine what pain they might be experiencing that's causing them to act this way. Hurt people hurt people. Understanding this doesn't excuse their behavior, but it does help you not take it personally. As Plato said, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. That person being rude to you might have just gotten terrible news. That driver honking aggressively might be rushing to the hospital. You don't know their battle. Assuming they have won makes their behavior less about you. The ninth technique is journaling after difficult moments. Don't just move on when you've been triggered. Later, when you're calm, write about it. What happened? What did you feel? What did you do? What would you do differently next time? This reflection turns experiences into wisdom. The 10th technique is the gratitude shift. When you're spiraling into negativity, force yourself to list 3 things you're grateful for right now. This isn't toxic positivity. This is neurological intervention. Gratitude and resentment cannot coexist in your brain at the same moment. By consciously choosing gratitude, you interrupt the negative spiral. Here's the truth about all these techniques. They won't work if you only reach for them during emergencies. They need to be practiced when you're calm, so they're available when you're not. An athlete doesn't learn a new move during the championship game. They practice it thousands of times beforehand, so it becomes automatic under pressure. Your emotional techniques work the same way. Practice the 10-second rule in low-stakes situations. Practice tactical breathing every morning. Practice reframing minor annoyances. Build the muscle when the weight is light so you can lift it when the weight is heavy. As Aristotle observed, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. These techniques become your habits, and your habits become your character, and your character becomes your destiny. You now have a toolkit, but tools don't build anything by themselves. You have to pick them up and use them. The next time you feel triggered, you have a choice. You can react the way you've always reacted, or you can reach into this toolkit and try something different. That choice is your power. That choice is your freedom. Use it. Chapter 7. Relationships Transformed. How non-reactivity changes everything. Here's something nobody tells you about relationships. The quality of your connections isn't determined by how much you have in common, how attracted you are to each other, or even how much you love each other. It's determined by how you handle conflict. And conflict is just another word for moments that trigger reactions. The difference between relationships that thrive and relationships that die isn't whether difficult moments happen. It's what you do in those moments. Every relationship in your life, from your marriage to your friendships to your professional connections, is being shaped right now, by your ability or inability to stay calm when things get heated. And here's the beautiful truth. When you change how you react, your relationships transform almost immediately. Let's start with the most important relationship in most people's lives: your romantic partnership. Marriage researcher John Gottman spent decades studying couples, and he discovered he could predict with over 90% accuracy which marriages would end in divorce. The key wasn't how often couples fought, it was how they fought. Gottman identified what he called the 4 horsemen of relationship apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Notice something about all 4? They're all reactive behaviors. They're what happens when you let your emotions drive instead of choosing your response. When your partner says something that bothers you and you immediately criticize their character instead of addressing the specific behavior, that's reactivity. When you respond with contempt, with that eye roll or sarcastic tone that communicates they're beneath you, that's your ego reacting. When you get defensive instead of actually listening to their concern, that's your amygdala hijacking the conversation. When you shut down and refuse to engage, that's reactivity disguised as control. The couples who stay together and stay happy, they've learned to pause, to breathe, to respond instead of react. They've learned that being right matters far less than being connected. As the poet Rumi wrote centuries ago, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. That field is where non-reactive people live. They're not trying to win. They're trying to understand. Think about the last argument you had with someone you love. In the moment, what were you really fighting for? If you're honest, you were probably fighting to be right, to be heard, to not be dismissed. Your ego was demanding victory. But what did victory cost you? Now, imagine that same conversation handled differently. Your partner says something that triggers you. But instead of firing back, you pause. You take a breath. You say, "Help me understand what you're feeling right now." You get curious instead of defensive. What happens next is magic. Their defensiveness drops because they're not being attacked. The conversation shifts from a battle to a collaboration. You might still disagree, but you're disagreeing as teammates trying to solve a problem, not as enemies trying to wound each other. This is what non-reactivity does in intimate relationships. It transforms combat into conversation. It turns conflicts into opportunities for deeper connection. Because here's the paradox: the moments of greatest tension are also the moments of greatest potential intimacy if you handle them right. Now, let's talk about your friendships. You know what kills friendships faster than anything else? When someone can't be happy for your success or can't sit with your pain without making it about them. Both of those are reactive behaviors driven by ego and emotional immaturity. A true friend can celebrate your wins without feeling diminished. They can listen to your struggles without rushing to fix them or compare them to their own. They can disagree with you without needing you to see things their way. This kind of friendship is rare because it requires emotional intelligence most people haven't developed. But you could be that friend. When your friend shares good news and you feel that twinge of envy, you can notice it, acknowledge it silently, and choose to celebrate anyway. When they're struggling and you feel uncomfortable with their pain, you can resist the urge to jump in with solutions and just be present. As the writer George Eliot observed, what do we live for if it is not to make life less difficult for each other? Non-reactivity is how you make life less difficult. You become a safe person, someone who won't punish others for having emotions or needing support. Let's move to your professional relationships, because this is where non-reactivity becomes a superpower. In the workplace, emotional reactions are expensive. They cost you credibility, opportunities, and respect. Your boss criticizes a project you work hard on. Your reactive colleague would get defensive, make excuses, maybe even push back aggressively. They protect their ego and damage their career in the process. You, armed with non-reactivity, respond differently. You pause. You say, "Thank you for the feedback. Can you help me understand specifically what needs to change? You've just turned criticism into coaching. A client is upset about a delay. Your reactive competitor would blame circumstances, get defensive, maybe even blame the client. You stay calm. You acknowledge their frustration. You take responsibility. You focus on solutions. Who do you think keeps that client? The author and leadership expert Simon Sinek said it perfectly. Leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. You can't take care of anyone when you're busy reacting. Leadership and reactivity are incompatible. Even casual relationships and brief interactions are transformed by non-reactivity. The barista who gets your order wrong. The customer service representative who can't solve your problem. The stranger who bumps into you without apologizing. Every one of these moments is a choice between reaction and response. And here's what most people don't realize. Those small moments train you for the big ones. Every time you choose calm over reactivity in a minor situation, you're strengthening the neural pathways that will serve you when the stakes are high. The Dalai Lama teaches, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Non-reactivity is practical compassion. It's recognizing that other people's behavior is usually about them, not you, and responding with understanding rather than offense. Let me tell you what happens to your relationships when you consistently practice non-reactivity. People start seeking you out. They want your opinion because they know you'll be honest without being harsh. They confide in you because they know you won't judge. They want you on their team because they know you won't panic under pressure. You become a calming presence in other people's storms. And that makes you irreplaceable in a world full of reactive people adding to the chaos. Your children, if you have them, learn a different way. They see an adult who feels emotions fully but isn't controlled by them. They learn that disagreement doesn't have to mean disconnection. They develop emotional intelligence because they're watching it modeled every day. Your romantic relationship deepens because your partner knows they can bring you anything without you making it worse with your reaction. Trust grows. Intimacy deepens. You create the relationship most people only dream about. Your professional network expands because people remember how you made them feel, especially in difficult moments. And they remember that you stayed steady when everyone else was losing it. Here's the truth that will set you free in relationships. You cannot control what other people do. You cannot control what they say, how they feel, or how they treat you. But you can control who you are in response to all of it. And who you are in response to difficulty is who you actually are. Everything else is just your personality on easy mode. Non-reactivity isn't about being perfect. You'll still mess up. You'll still react sometimes. But the trajectory matters more than any single moment. Are you getting better at pausing? Are you catching yourself sooner? Are you apologizing quicker when you do react poorly? That growth is what transforms relationships. Not perfection, growth. When you commit to responding instead of reacting, every relationship in your life begins to change. Some get stronger, some naturally fall away, and new ones appear with people who resonate with the person you're becoming. This is how you build a life surrounded by depth instead of drama. Chapter 8, Dealing with Toxic People When They're Trying to Get a Reaction. Let's talk about the hardest test of non-reactivity. The people who aren't just having a bad day. The people who are actively trying to provoke you. The manipulators, the narcissists, the bullies, the energy vampires who seem to feed on your reactions. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone wants peace. Not everyone is operating in good faith. Some people will push your buttons specifically because they enjoy watching you lose control. And if you don't understand this, you'll keep falling into the same trap thinking if you just explain yourself better, if you just stay calm enough, if you just give them one more chance, things will change. They won't, because the problem isn't your reaction. The problem is their intention. This doesn't mean you should give up on non-reactivity. It means you need to understand what non-reactivity looks like when dealing with people who don't have your best interests at heart. First, Let's identify who we're talking about. Toxic people come in many forms, but they share common patterns. They consistently make you feel drained after interactions. They violate your boundaries repeatedly even after you've stated them clearly. They never take responsibility for their behavior. They turn every conversation back to themselves. They use your emotions against you. The chronic complainer who refuses every solution. The family member who brings up your past mistakes at every gathering. The coworker who takes credit for your work and spreads rumors when confronted. The friend who only calls when they need something. The partner who punishes you with silence or rage when you don't do what they want. These aren't people having occasional bad moments. These are people with patterns of behavior that harm you. Now here's where most advice about difficult people gets it wrong. They tell you to be understanding, to set boundaries, to communicate clearly. All of that is good advice for people who are fundamentally healthy, but occasionally difficult. It doesn't work with truly toxic people because toxic people don't respect boundaries. They see boundaries as challenges to overcome. Author and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel said something profound. We must take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. When dealing with toxic people, non-reactivity doesn't mean neutrality. It means strategic, calm, firm action. So what does non-reactive boundary setting actually look like? It means you don't get emotional when you enforce consequences. When someone crosses your boundary, you don't yell, you don't explain yourself for the 100th time, you don't get pulled into their drama. You simply follow through with the consequence you stated. Calmly, consistently, without anger or guilt. Your toxic family member makes a cruel comment at dinner. Your reactive self would snap back or sit there stewing. Your non-reactive self says calmly, I've asked you not to speak to me that way. I'm leaving now. I'll see you at the next gathering. And you leave. No argument. No justification. Just a calm boundary enforced. This is what confuses toxic people. They're used to getting reactions. They're used to drama. They're used to you engaging with their provocations. When you stop playing the game, when you respond with calm consequences instead of emotional reactions, you take away their power. The second strategy is what I call gray rocking. This technique is especially useful with narcissists and manipulators. You become as interesting as a gray rock. You give minimal responses. You share nothing personal. You don't react to their provocations. They try to start an argument. You say, hum, and change the subject. They fish for emotional information. You give factual responses with no emotional content. They try to push your buttons. Your face stays neutral, your voice stays even, and you give them nothing to work with. As Mark Twain wisely noted, never argue with stupid people. They would drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. Gray rocking is how you refuse to be dragged down. The third strategy is limiting exposure. Non-reactivity doesn't mean unlimited access. Some people have earned minimal space in your life. You don't have to cut them off completely, but you don't have to give them prime real estate in your time and energy either. Maybe you see that toxic family member only at major holidays instead of every weekend. Maybe you keep that difficult coworker relationship strictly professional instead of trying to be friends. Maybe you stop sharing vulnerable parts of yourself with a friend who's proven they can't be trusted with them. This isn't punishment. This isn't even judgment. It's just wisdom. As Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Believing someone when they show you they're toxic means adjusting your expectations and exposure accordingly. The fourth strategy is emotional detachment. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop making their behavior about you. Their cruelty isn't about your worth. Their manipulation isn't about your intelligence. Their drama isn't about your peace. They're acting out their own pain, their own dysfunction, their own issues. You just happen to be in proximity. When you understand this deeply, their provocations lose power. You can observe their behavior without absorbing their toxicity. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. With toxic people, what happens is they will try to provoke you. How you react determines whether they succeed. The fifth strategy is documentation and witnesses. Especially in professional settings, toxic people often gaslight. They deny saying what they said, doing what they did. Protect yourself with records. Follow up verbal conversations with emails summarizing what was discussed. Include others in communications when appropriate. This isn't paranoia. It's prudent protection. Now, let's address the hardest part. What if the toxic person is someone you can't easily limit, like a parent, a spouse, or a boss? If it's a parent, you get to decide as an adult what kind of relationship you want. Honoring your parents doesn't mean accepting abuse. It means treating them with respect while also respecting yourself enough to enforce boundaries. You can love someone from a distance. You can care about someone without giving them the power to destroy your peace. If it's a spouse, the question becomes whether they're willing to work on the toxicity. If they acknowledge the problem and genuinely commit to change with actions, not just words, there's hope. If they deny, deflect, and blame you for their behavior, you have a much harder decision to make. Non-reactivity doesn't mean staying in an abusive relationship. Sometimes the non-reactive choice is to leave. If it's a boss, you document everything, maintain professionalism, and simultaneously plan your exit strategy. You don't have to stay in a toxic work environment to prove anything. Sometimes the most powerful non-reactive choice is quietly finding a better opportunity while maintaining composure in the current one. Here's what you need to understand. Toxic people escalate before they give up. When you stop reacting the way you used to, when you start enforcing boundaries, they often get worse before they get better. They increase the provocations to get the reaction they're accustomed to getting. This is where most people break. They think, see, it's not working. They're even worse now. But this escalation is actually proof it is working. They're losing control and they're panicking. If you hold steady through the escalation, they eventually either change their behavior or they exit your life. Either outcome is a win. The goal isn't to change them. You can't control other people. The goal is to stop letting them control you, to stop giving them your peace, your power, your emotional energy. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. The same is true for anger, for upset, for drama. They can try, but whether they succeed is up to you. Stay calm, enforce boundaries, limit exposure, protect your peace. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Chapter 9, The Spiritual Dimension, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Peace. There's something fascinating that happens when you study the world's great spiritual traditions. Buddhism from the East, Stoicism from ancient Greece and Rome, Christianity's teachings on turning the other cheek, Islamic Sufism, Hindu philosophy, indigenous wisdom traditions from around the globe. They all arrived at the same truth from different paths. The truth we've been exploring together. That peace comes not from controlling what happens to you, but from mastering how you respond to what happens to you. This isn't coincidence. For thousands of years, the wisest humans who ever lived have been pointing to the same insight. Non-reactivity isn't just a psychological skill or a practical technique. It's a spiritual practice that connects you to something deeper than your ego, bigger than your immediate emotions, more enduring than any temporary circumstance. Let's start with Buddhism, because no tradition has explored the nature of reactivity more thoroughly. The Buddha taught that suffering comes from attachment and aversion. We cling to what we want and resist what we don't want. And both of those create suffering because life constantly gives us things we didn't ask for and takes away things we wanted to keep. Reactivity is attachment and aversion in action. You react because reality isn't matching your expectations. Someone behaves in a way you don't want. A situation unfolds differently than you hoped. And your ego immediately resists what is and demands what should be. The Buddhist said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. This teaching is 2,500 years old, and it perfectly describes what modern neuroscience now proves. Your reactions hurt you more than they hurt anyone else. Buddhist practice teaches equanimity, the ability to remain mentally and emotionally stable regardless of external circumstances. Not indifference, not coldness, but a deep acceptance that life includes pleasant and unpleasant experiences, and neither one defines you. When you practice equanimity, you're not trying to force positive thinking. You're simply noticing your reactions without being swept away by them. You see the anger arise. You notice the urge to lash out, and you let it pass like a cloud moving across the sky. You are the sky. The emotion is just weather. Now let's look at Stoicism, the ancient Greek and Roman philosophy that's experiencing a massive revival today. The Stoics were incredibly practical about emotions. They didn't deny them or suppress them. They studied them, understood them, and learned to work with them. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor we've quoted before, wrote daily reflections on how to handle difficult people and challenging situations. One of his most powerful insights was this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The Stoics distinguish between what's in your control and what's not. Other people's behavior, not in your control. Your reaction to their behavior, completely in your control. The weather, not in your control. Whether you let bad weather ruin your mood, in your control. Epictetus, who started life as a slave before becoming one of history's great philosophers, taught that we're disturbed not by things, but by our judgments about things. The event itself is neutral. Your interpretation of the event creates your emotional response. Someone cuts you off in traffic. That's just an event. Your judgment that they're a terrible person who disrespected you, that they did it on purpose, that this is an outrage, those judgments create your anger. Change the judgment and you change the emotion. Christianity teaches something that sounds impossible on the surface. Turn the other cheek. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. For centuries, people have misunderstood these teachings as doormat philosophy, as weakness disguised as virtue. But Jesus wasn't teaching weakness. He was teaching the ultimate strength. Refusing to let someone else's evil turn you evil. Refusing to let their hate fill you with hate. Maintaining your integrity regardless of how others treat you. As Martin Luther King Jr., who built a movement on these principles, said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. When you react to hate with hate, you multiply the darkness. When you respond to hate with calm strength, you introduce light." This doesn't mean accepting abuse. Jesus also flipped tables in the temple when money changers were exploiting people. But he did it as a conscious choice, not an emotional reaction. Righteous action from a place of clarity, not rage from a place of ego. The Sufi tradition within Islam speaks of the nafs, the ego self that's constantly demanding gratification and reacting to threats. Sufi practice involves watching the nafs, understanding its patterns, and not identifying with it. You have an ego, but you're not your ego. Rumi, the 13th century Sufi poet, wrote about a guest house where all emotions are welcomed, but none are permanent residents. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. This is radical acceptance. You don't fight against your emotions. You acknowledge them, you feel them, but you don't let them run your life. They're visitors, not owners. Hindu philosophy teaches about the witness consciousness, the part of you that observes your thoughts and emotions without being identical to them. In meditation, you practice watching your mind without being swept away by its content. You notice the anger without becoming the anger. The Bhagavad Gita, one of Hinduism's sacred texts, teaches about performing action without attachment to results. You do your best and let go of outcomes you can't control. This is non-reactivity applied to all of life. You engage fully without being emotionally dependent on specific results. Indigenous wisdom traditions around the world emphasize connection to something larger than individual ego. Whether it's the land, the ancestors, the community, or the Great Spirit, there's recognition that your small self and its reactions are not the center of the universe. A Native American teaching speaks of two wolves fighting inside every person. One wolf is anger, envy, greed, resentment. The other is peace, love, hope, kindness. Which wolf wins? The one you feed. Every time you react, you're feeding one wolf or the other. Here's what all these traditions understood. Your true self, your deepest identity, is not your emotions, not your reactions, not even your thoughts. Those are all experiences you have, but they're not what you are. You're the awareness that experiences all of it. The consciousness that witnesses the anger rise and fall. The presence that remains when emotions pass. When you touch that deeper identity, reactivity loses its grip because you're no longer defending a small self that feels constantly threatened. Eckhart Tolle, a modern spiritual teacher, puts it simply. You are not your mind. You are the awareness behind the mind. When you realize this experientially, not just intellectually, everything changes. You can watch your mind throw a tantrum without joining in. This is why meditation practices exist in every tradition. They're training for this witnessing awareness. You sit and watch thoughts arise and pass. You notice emotions come and go. You practice being the awareness rather than the content of awareness. You don't have to be religious to access this spiritual dimension. You don't have to believe in anything supernatural. You just have to recognize that there's more to you than your immediate reactions, that you have access to a deeper wisdom than your triggered ego. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, taught, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." Letting go of reactive patterns, letting go of ego's demands, letting go of the need to control everything. This creates space for something wiser to emerge. Non-reactivity at this level isn't a technique you apply. It's a way of being you inhabit. It's coming home to who you really are beneath all the conditioning, all the wounds, all the stories you've told yourself about who you have to be. And from that place of deeper identity, peace isn't something you achieve. It's what you are. Chapter 10, Your New Beginning, Bringing It All Together. This is where everything changes. Not because you've reached the end of this audiobook, but because you're standing at the beginning of a completely different way of living. You now understand what most people will never grasp. That your reactions are destroying your life. That your brain is wired for survival, not success. That the pause between stimulus and response holds all your power. That emotional intelligence determines your outcomes more than intellect ever will. That your ego is not your friend. That you have practical tools to stay calm under pressure. That non-reactivity transforms every relationship you have. That toxic people lose their power when you stop feeding their games. And that every wisdom tradition in human history has pointed to this same truth. So what now? How do you take all of this and actually live it? Let's bring it all together into a practical path forward, because knowledge without action is just entertainment. And you didn't come this far to be entertained. You came to transform. First, let's recap the core lessons that will serve you for the rest of your life. Lesson 1 is this. Your instant reactions are costing you everything. Every time you snap back, every time you let someone's behavior control your emotional state, every time you say something in anger that you can't take back, you're paying a price. That price might be a damaged relationship, a lost opportunity, your health, your peace of mind, or your self-respect. The cost is always higher than the temporary satisfaction of the reaction. Lesson 2. Your brain is running ancient software in a modern world. Your amygdala cannot tell the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. It floods your system with stress hormones and hijacks your rational thinking. This isn't a character flaw. This is biology. But understanding it means you can work with it instead of being controlled by it. Lesson 3. The pause is your superpower. Between every trigger and every response, there's a space. In that space lives your freedom. One breath, one moment of awareness, one strategic delay before you speak or act. That pause changes everything because it brings your prefrontal cortex back online and gives you access to choices that disappear when you react automatically. Lesson 4. Emotional intelligence beats IQ every single time. Your ability to recognize what you're feeling, manage your emotions, read other people, and navigate relationships determines your success far more than how smart you are. And unlike intelligence, emotional intelligence can be developed at any age through conscious practice. Lesson 5. Your ego is not your friend. That voice that demands you in every argument, prove every point, defend every criticism, and never back down, it's destroying your relationships and limiting your growth. True strength doesn't need to be defended. Confidence doesn't need to be proven. When you let go of ego's demands, you become genuinely powerful. Lesson 6. You need practical tools for the heat of the moment. The 10-second rule, tactical breathing, the movie screen method, physical grounding, reframing, strategic exits. These aren't just nice ideas. They're emergency equipment for when your world is falling apart and you need something to hold on to. Lesson 7. Non-reactivity transforms relationships. When you stop making other people's behavior about you, when you respond instead of react, when you choose connection over being right, everything shifts. Your romantic relationship deepens. Your friendships become genuine. Your professional network expands. You become the person everyone wants on their team. Lesson 8. Toxic people require different strategies. Not everyone deserves your energy. Not everyone is operating in good faith. Some people have earned limited access to your life. Boundaries without anger. Consequences without emotion. Protection without drama. This is how you handle people who are actively trying to harm you. Lesson 9. This is spiritual work, not just psychological technique. Every wisdom tradition points to the same truth. You are not your emotions. You are not your reactions. You are the awareness that witnesses all of it. When you touch that deeper identity, reactivity loses its grip because you're no longer defending a small self that feels constantly threatened. And lesson 10, the final lesson. You have everything you need right now to start living differently. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need other people to change. You don't need more time or more resources. You just need to make a different choice in the next moment that triggers you. As Lao Tzu wisely taught, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Your journey to unshakable calm begins with the next time someone cuts you off in traffic and you choose to breathe instead of rage. The next time someone criticizes you and you choose curiosity instead of defensiveness. The next time life doesn't go your way and you choose acceptance instead of resistance. Here's your action plan going forward. This is how you take everything you've learned and turn it into the life you deserve. Action step 1. Identify your top 3 triggers. What situations or people reliably make you reactive? Write them down. Awareness is the first step toward change. You can't manage what you don't acknowledge. Action step 2. Choose one technique from chapter 6 and practice it daily for 30 days. Not just when you're triggered. Practice when you're calm. If you choose tactical breathing, do it every morning. If you choose the 10-second rule, use it in low-stakes situations. Build the muscle when the weight is light. Action step 3. Create a personal pause reminder. Maybe it's a note on your phone. Maybe it's a phrase you repeat to yourself. Maybe it's a physical object you carry. Something that reminds you in heated moments that you have a choice. Mine is simple. Between stimulus and response, I have power. Action step 4. Apologize for past reactions. Think of someone you've hurt with your reactivity. Reach out to them. Take responsibility without excuses or justifications. Say, I reacted poorly and I'm sorry. I'm working on being better. This isn't just for them. It's for you. It closes old loops and commits you to a new path. Action step 5. Find an accountability partner. Tell someone you trust about this commitment. Ask them to gently point out when you're being reactive. Give them permission to ask, is that a reaction or a response? We all have blind spots. Other people can see what we cannot. Action step 6. Journal for 5 minutes after difficult interactions. What happened? What did you feel? How did you respond? What would you do differently next time? This reflection turns experiences into wisdom. You're not just living life. You're learning from it. Action step 7. Celebrate small wins. Every time you pause instead of react, acknowledge it. Every time you choose response over reaction, that's a victory. Don't wait for perfection. Progress is what matters. You're rewiring decades of conditioning. Be patient with yourself. As Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. You want a calmer world? Be calm. You want more understanding? Be understanding. You want less reactivity? Stop reacting. Here's what I know about you. You wouldn't have made it this far if you weren't serious about change. Most people quit when things get uncomfortable. You stayed. That tells me something important about who you are. You're ready. Ready to stop being a puppet to other people's behavior. Ready to stop giving away your power every time someone pushes your buttons. Ready to become the calm, composed, powerful person you've always known you could be. The world needs more people like who you're becoming. People who don't add to the chaos. People who bring calm to crisis. People who can be counted on to stay steady when everything's falling apart. Your relationships need you to be this person. Your children, if you have them, need to see this modeled. Your workplace needs this leadership. Your community needs this stability. But most of all, you need this for yourself. Because you deserve to move through life without being dragged around by your emotions. You deserve relationships that deepen instead of deteriorate. You deserve peace that isn't dependent on perfect circumstances. You deserve to respect yourself because you've developed self-mastery. As the Roman poet Horace wrote 2,000 years ago, rule your mind or it will rule you. You now have the tools to rule your mind. The question is whether you'll use them. I'll leave you with this final thought. Right now, somewhere in your life, a moment is coming that will test everything you've learned here. Someone will say something that cuts deep. Something will happen that feels unbearably unfair. You'll feel that familiar surge of emotion demanding immediate reaction. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. The same choice you've always had, but now you'll see it clearly. You can react the way you've always reacted and get the results you've always gotten. Or you can pause, breathe, and choose differently. That choice is your power. That choice is your freedom. That choice is the difference between the life you've been living and the life that's waiting for you. Everything you need is already inside you. The wisdom, the strength, the ability to stay calm when others lose control. Now go claim it. Go live it. Go become the unshakable person you were always meant to be. This isn't the end of a book. This is the beginning of your new life. A life where you're no longer controlled by your reactions. A life where you respond with wisdom instead of impulse. A life where you're finally, completely, powerfully free.